Welcome to the Better Outcomes podcast, where we discuss all things leadership, sales, and communication in Australian business. At Better Outcomes Training, we provide world-class training solutions for businesses who want to arm their teams with cutting-edge skills to lead better, sell better, and enjoy more success, purpose, and profit from the work they do. For a full breakdown of all the courses we offer, visit www.better-outcomes.com.au. There's also a link in the description. Now, on to today's podcast. Enjoy.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Better Outcomes Training podcast. We are back. It's been a big break, long time between drinks. Paul Harrison, how are you, mate?
I am absolutely fantastic, cuz top of the world. Awesome to be back. It's been a long while. Absolutely. So it's great to be back. Yes, hopefully we can add some more value to the business people of Australia and surrounding parts.
Yes. Yeah, it's been a big start to the year. What are we now? Start of May. And we're just getting back into it. I got absolutely swamped at the start of this year through work. It started off like a Christmas rush for us. It was amazing. We went the first 3 months pretty much working 7 days a week. So big jobs, long hours, and haven't been able to dedicate much time to anything else. You know, when you get into that kind of, you can't see the forest for the trees, you get a bit swamped, and you have to go back to basics, just doing what you can do to get through. So that's where I've been. Had a good Christmas break. Been taking care of myself, sort of. Yourself, Paulie, how's it been?
Yeah, good. Just again, as well, just busy, which I'm very grateful for. Obviously, setting up my own business and running everything moving forward is going great. But just busy. You have certain moments where you're grateful for the work you do and how much you enjoy it, and most importantly, obviously, the results the clients are getting as well. Beginning of this year, we've had some phenomenal results with clients, yes. Particularly with the sales teams. And I mean, people getting six-figure returns from trainings in instantaneous amount of times, which is crazy. Which brings me on to a thought process. We're going to be running a lot more lunch and learn webinars, and one of the first ones I'm going to do is I'm going to share with anybody who's interested some of the techniques that we've utilized to change the approaches and start to building high-performing sales teams. There are a lot of stuff that is not ever spoken about. It's on a much deeper basis, but the results that are following in from this are just absolutely crazy. So yeah, it's a good place to be. It's happy. I'm busy. I had 4 days back to back last week. So Saturday I was broken, man. I was like, just sat there looking, watching the TV, just relaxing. Saying to myself, I should go to the gym. It's like, no, bro. You just got to sit down. You got to relax here,
Yeah, I'm not. I looked back last month, and I'm not sure how I got through last year with everything that I was doing. Yeah. It was quite crazy. Podcast, learning, jiu-jitsu, gym work, 7 day weeks. It was crazy fitting it all in, but when we stopped over Christmas, I felt lost. Yeah. Like it was like the brain's learning. It wants to keep learning. It's curious. It wants to find stuff. So keeping that big bad boy satiated by feeding it a lot of podcasts and books and keeping it learning and curious has been fun. But learning at the moment, bit of reading around Chase Hughes, yes, and some the psychology and body language and things like that. Very interesting for me. Not just Chase Hughes, quite a few different experts in that area, and also because I'm an old man now, I seem to be listening to longevity podcasts on how to keep my body healthy and to which always makes me laugh. So I didn't know I was supposed to be doing that. Didn't even know it was a thing. Trying to get recovery in. So, been staying busy. So what we've tried to do now is, because we've been busy, we're going to shorten these podcasts up a little bit and come at it from a different angle. Try and change things up. And instead of our usual big deep dives into certain topics, Paulie, we're going to try and get stuff that's more happening now, more top of mind, fresh, topics that you've bumped into, especially in the workshops? So more questions, words of wisdom, or questions from the workshop, words of workshop wisdom, so to speak.
Yeah.
Which are based on actual questions and problems that people have been having in workshops, and I'll be bringing to the table things that I've been bumping into this week on in my role as well. So try and keep it a little bit shorter. Try not to get wandering and talk about farming or rugby or jiu-jitsu as we usually did last year. We'll try and stay focused, Paulie.
Yeah, absolutely. And because I love the point on that, and I think that the design of this is going to be very, very relevant for people, because again, it's interesting because you start seeing challenges that people are dealing with. And here's the fascinating thing: is training so many people, you get to see the trends that are happening in business. Almost be like, when I say trends, I'm talking about trends in terms of skill sets and social interaction with people ahead of time. So we can see problems that are coming up, coming down the pipe. If I'm presenting and training so many people, you get to see trends there. And these, what I'm keen to share with a lot of people is really a lot of the trends we're seeing. We'll do those more specifically deep dives in some of the lunch and learns, but also real life problems that people are dealing with in the workshops. And I can give some contextual examples, because if these workshops that people are attending and they're taking trainings from it and observations, concerns, insights, very often these are things I haven't thought of before as well. And you and I are very much like this with regards to always trying to learn something new as well, taking on new stuff. So I think that with it being timeless, so time related, it's kind of trending as well, but also it's real lived experience with things that people are battling with. And if I can share the insight that obviously I shared on the workshop, which is always my intention there, but then also relay that back to the wider audience, which is all the listeners, then very often that can help there as well. So I think it'll be a nice little switch up, and we'll see how we go with this one.
Just quickly on that, I know that with the trainings we run, especially the ones that you run, you like to be as specific as possible, but you have to keep the topics reasonably broad, so that you can touch base with everyone. And then sometimes if someone has a particular question, it's very hard to dig into that for a number of reasons. I mean, mainly the time that you've got maybe up to a dozen or 2 dozen people sitting in the room, so you can't take up that much time. You've got to get through things. But also getting the context behind the problem and the actual the structure of how it started and the breakdown, that can take a fair bit of time. So I think that'd be one of the reasons why we can do this, and we can break it down a little bit further.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think you raised a great point there, and something that I will share, because it actually came up again this week, and it comes up I think a lot of the time in workshops. And depending on the type of training you're doing, if we look at facilitators, so trainers, facilitators, whatever you want to call us, there are from time to time, there are facilitators who will just facilitate conversation between the attendees. So all the attendees come, we're talking about sales, we're talking about leadership, and we'll have conversations around those, which is something I do a lot of. But then also what I want to try and aim to do is give people strategies, techniques, and understandings that's going to be game changing for them when they go back to work. So I never just want to give you a one size fits all type of approach. I always want to try and personalize the training as much as I possibly can to each person as an individual, because people are going to come with individual challenges. And the aspect with that is what we'll do is I will teach what I believe to be broad structures, which are best practice across the board. And then obviously I've got clients thinking about these best practice and how they would start to apply them in their workshop. The challenge that I'm coming up against very often, and this normally happens towards the afternoon session, which is quite interesting because we go through process, and I'll very often set broad structures and then give contextual examples of exactly how to apply the stuff. But what starts happening is towards the end, when defenses start coming down and people start becoming maybe a little bit tired and what have you, and those defenses start coming down, people start looking for what I might call quick fixes. And a quick fix might be we're dealing with and this question actually came up last week when we were having a discussion of dealing with difficult people or difficult behaviors. Okay, we all frame that whole thing up.
Yeah.
But very often when we're having that kind of conversation, people are thinking about somebody that they've had a negative interaction with, and they are dealing with, and there's a lot of emotion around it, and very often there's a lot of context around it as well. And often people will get into the nitty gritty of the actual strategies on how to deal with these. Buy yourself some time, keep in the right frame of mind, think clearly, say and do the right thing, all of that. But then somebody's thinking about a particular context, and they say, well, how would you deal with somebody who is just very aggressive now, or just very disagreeable? Now, that is, they are relaying a lived experience with a particular person they could probably name, and they are battling to actually see the solution across. And whilst it is a sort of a bed I make for myself, or a rod for my own back, because I do try to walk that line between giving them the perfect answer or allowing them to discover the perfect answer, the downside to that is very often this person is sitting thinking about that interaction with that person, and they are only giving me what they're giving me. Now, I'm not saying that they're being, light on the truth or anything like that, but very often when you've had an interaction with a negative interaction with somebody, very often there can be a huge amount of context that is left out there.
Yeah.
Not intentionally, but just as we go through the process. And secondly, there can be a high degree of emotion associated with that experience. And the thing is, of course, this person's talking to me about the scenario, but I don't have all the information because, of course, there's additional context and what have you, or there's additional emotion that maybe might have tweaked, how it actually happened and what have you. And my answer to that very often is, I'll give you the best I can with the information I have. However, the challenge is very often is I might not be able to give you an answer just from the information you've given me, because if I was standing next to you, I might see something very different to the information you've delivered to me in the process. And this is it's a frustration. It's something I'm working on. I do, of course, offer up my time, after the training, what have you, for people to come have a chat with me and have a conversation about the situation. Because the truth of the matter is, particularly when we're dealing with highly emotionally charged entities like difficult people, difficult conversations, is there might be 100 different approaches I might deal with depending on the nuance of the situation. What do I mean by that? If I've got somebody who is being overtly aggressive, my approach would be very different to if I'm dealing with somebody who might be considered passive aggressive or undermining or something like that. So the nuance of the situation would, in specific contexts, would mean that I would take a different approach with that specific situation. So it's something that comes up quite regularly. It is something I pre-frame heavily at the beginning of the training. But, it's kind of like, I like to take it as a compliment, because I think that people are sitting there thinking, wow, the information I'm getting is great. Maybe Paul's got a solution for this. Also, they feel comfortable enough to share that with me, which is awesome as well. The challenge is very often, if I was standing alongside the person in that lived experience in that moment, very often I'd have a very different answer to just the information they're giving me, which is quite a challenge. But again, it's a nice challenge to have, I guess.
Yeah,
if I could say that.
And like you said, if you're standing next to someone, listening to them have a difficult conversation with someone else, or a heated argument, or however you want to put it, it can give you a completely different perspective, because I've sat and watched difficult people argue, talk to both of them afterwards, and they're not listening to each other.
Yeah.
But he said that. No, he didn't. He did.
Yeah.
He did. You didn't hear it because you were switched off. You were focused on the brain sees fear, or it sees a worry, or it's got a problem, and the amygdala kicks in and goes, is this fight or flight? What's going on? Shuts down the creative part of the brain, swamps you with these fight or flight chemicals. Everything switches off, and like you say, you've given up listening to them. You're just waiting for them to shut up so you can reply.
Yeah. 100%.
And you're not even hearing what they're saying, and there's big chunks of the conversation missed out. There's big parts of the problem missed out, and you just focus on, oh, well, he called me this, or he said I wasn't that. Well, yeah, but there was a lot more to it than that. So, difficult problems to solve. Geez, good luck with that one, buddy.
Human beings, who'd have us?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I reckon. So, all right. So, what do you got for us this week, Paulie? What are we looking at first up?
Oh man, I got some beautiful stuff. I worked with will be 29 people this week over two-day workshops. So the first workshop I was working with was some brilliant people, some just phenomenal people who were wanting to learn about coaching and presenting, which was awesome, absolutely awesome. And then the second group was focused primarily on leadership, which was the Thursday and the Friday, which was again outstanding. And I tell you, I came to a conclusion the other day that one of the things I love the most about the work I do is that very, very often, I say the vast majority, not always, because sometimes I have to open people up a little bit, but the vast majority of people come to training. They have a open mindset. They have a growth mindset, which is absolutely beautiful. But the first thing I want to touch on is a beautiful comment that came out in terms of leadership, which was this aspect. The attendee said, we were talking about negative labels that people are terrified of getting put on them. Okay. And the example I gave during COVID was that very often a lot of managers became very, very concerned with being too proactive with their staff because they didn't want to get the negative label of micromanaging. Okay. And you think about this because this comes with pros and cons. And so there was some other context that happened just before I got into that. But one of the questions that was raised by one of the attendees, which I thought was brilliant for a couple of reasons, because I think it shows a couple of things, was the question was, when did micromanaging become a dirty word? And I thought that was brilliant because the thing is very often, as an employee, often you have people who are complaining about their leadership that's micromanaging. And of course, what is the inference from that is the reason I'm micromanaging you potentially is because I don't trust you. That's how people often think, but it's not obviously like that. And that got me thinking with regards to micromanaging versus being very supportive. So it depends what you mean by the term micromanaging. Okay. Yeah. So let me give you a scenario here. If you've got a manager, a leader who wants to be very proactive with supporting their team, depending on how they communicate it, they might be seen by that team as very supportive, or they might be seen as micromanaging. Would you agree with that? Down to the interpretation of the audience. Does that resonate?
Yes. And it would depend on where the audience is, because I would always, if I had someone who was doing that to me, I would see it more as micromanaging over being supportive. It would have to be, unless they framed it up at the start, or there was reasons for it, and that was spelled out to me. I would just see it as micromanaging. And being a tradie, there's an arrogance that comes with it, being a tradie when you're an older fella. So we won't go there yet. But as far as my brain would always lean to micromanaging, unless they framed it up quite well and said, look, the reasons I'm doing this is because of this. I'm not particularly picking on you, or I'm not watching you, or I don't trust you, but I need to make sure of this.
Absolutely.
That would sway me.
And that was exactly where we went with it. So here was the thought process, and it's very, very interesting because very often you can have some leadership, and I'm not saying this should happen. I'm saying I have to call what I see happening, because I see leadership often stepping back a little bit, particularly newer management, because they don't want to be seen as being micromanagers, and this can cause some issues as well. So here's my take on this, is that we as human beings, we don't want to have negative labels put on us. Okay, this happens in sales a hell of a lot as well, and I think it makes salespeople, it holds sales back because they don't want to be seen as pushy or salesy or anything like that, which cause a lot of other issues. But here's my takeaway from this, is this: firstly, human beings, we don't want to have negative labels put on us. Okay, we don't want it. We don't want to. Second thing is, though, is people are less inclined to put a negative label on you when you talk in terms of benefits to them. So I'll say that again. Yes. Human beings are less inclined to put negative labels on you when you talk in terms of benefits to them. So here's what my take on this is, and this was a beautiful conversation that happened with these leaders. Absolutely fantastic. But it was how you communicate what you're doing is going to dictate how it's interpreted. And some people listening to this might think this is overkill, but stay with me on this. If I came to you, Cuz, and let's say that I just said, okay, listen, Cuz, I need to check in with you 3 times a day to make sure you're getting everything right, you're going to interpret that as micromanaging. But if I came to you and said something along the lines of, Cuz, listen, as you know, there's a new system and procedure that's been implemented here. And I saw this during COVID, because obviously people had to change their whole processes. New technologies instituted and stuff like that. So now I've got a reason. Very often I have to be able to think of a reason to frame this up well. But then came to you and said, Cuz, listen, I know you're good at what you do and all of that good stuff. And the situation is, the reason I'm coming having a chat with you is because there's new systems and procedures that were put into place. Now, I know that these are going to be challenging across the board, so I want to be quite proactive with just making sure that I'm with you. So you got the process down. You're fully supported in the application of actually what you're doing, because I don't want I don't want you to waste any time if there's like a mistake or something like that, which often comes with new system procedures. I want to make sure that we can get it right the first time, so we don't have to come back and redo it. It's going to cost us time and frustration. So what I'll do is I'll check in with you 2 or 3 times today just to make sure we're at the right point there, and so you feel fully supported. Now, if I was talking directly to you, Cuz, I might change my terminology a little bit there. But what I've done is that second approach was I was framing it up in a much more supportive manner, rather than just, listen, I'm going to be checking in with you. And I want to frame it up always in terms of benefits to the target audience.
Yeah.
Does that resonate?
It does. It does. And I guess there's times when you may need to micromanage someone or be more supportive of someone, whether they're a new employee, new systems coming in. Maybe there's been some issues or something and they're trying to track it down, or there's things going on, but as long as it's explained that way, then, and it's you could also say it as a group to a group. There's new systems coming into place. I'm going to be around. I'm going to be making sure it's going through. So you got any problems, and instead of asking, are there any questions? Ask who's got the first question. You're going to have questions. Hit me with them.
Absolutely.
To make sure that people aren't feeling singled out or picked on, and that it's going to be a group thing. This is what's going to happen until I get to the bottom of it. And if you're a new employee, I'll do it sometimes. Drop them in the deep end, but keep an eye on them and see how they go. Not so much sink or swim, but see what skills they've got, what skills they haven't, where I have to look for, or it'll tell me what's going on, put them under a bit of pressure, see how they perform. Mm-hmm. And then if they're not up to scratch, just say to them, hey, bud, I need you to pick up on this. I'm gonna help you out with this one, so I'm gonna work with you a little bit, or I'll probably use the words, I'm going to ride you a little bit harder until we get this sorted. But, I'm going to be keeping an eye on you. If you got problems, what's going on here? That kind of approach. For a guy who's been there for a while, though, and you've got a new manager coming in, and like if I have a new manager coming in above me and he wants to try and sit there and watch me all day, there's going to be some friction, mate. There's going to be a bit of feedback thrown that way. So
sure.
You need to try and frame it up. Even if the new manager comes in and goes, listen, I know you've been here for a while. You obviously know what you're doing, but I just need to get up to speed on where you are. So I'll be hopping around a bit and asking questions just so that I can get used to the systems as well. Like you said, always comes back to how you frame up that first conversation, I think.
Absolutely, because I think as soon as there's an interpretation of that I'm not trustworthy, or I'm not up to standard, or you think I'm wasting time or something, which could be called a de-escalation of status, the way we train status up. Then very often we're going to get pushback. But I like the approach of making it the norm, having that public putting it out there. But I just thought it was a really, really, really good observation that my client raised. She goes, when did micromanaging become a bad thing? And my interpretation from that was, or what I understood from the question, was that people will have different understandings of those words, micromanaging. Some people might be framing it up as being very supportive. They might think of that already. Some people might be thinking, oh, my boss obviously doesn't agree with me or doesn't trust me enough. Therefore, that's why they're checking in with me on the regular. So again, so often when we're training, we say one word or one term has a multitude of different meanings to different people based on different past experiences. So just to clarify what's meant by that, I thought that was an absolutely beautiful observation there. I really, really did.
Yeah, and Exactly. And I've worked with a lot of people over the years who it's like they can't trust anyone else to do the job as good as them, regardless
Yes,
of what it
yes,
is.
yeah,
And if you're doing something and they don't trust you, they'll hover, or
yeah,
they'll get in and do it themselves. And oh, here, I'll do it. And it it can be quite demoralizing when that happens, and you've got someone working with you like that, because it's like, well, I can do it just as well. You haven't given me the chance. And B, how am I ever going to learn if you don't let me do it?
absolutely.
So there's two sides to that coin as well. So making sure you frame up, Mike. Okay, so you've got the term micromanaging. Frame it up, put it out there. So
Yeah,
listen, it's going to probably feel like I'm micromanaging you, but
yeah,
I'm here to make sure that you're okay and everything's going well. All right, so we'll get through this. It won't take long. You'll sort it out, and then we'll move on. Something along
absolutely.
those lines. But
How you communicate it dictates how it's interpreted. How it's
yeah,
interpreted dictates how it's acted on. If you communicate in a way where I see you as supportive, we're on board.
yeah,
If you communicate with me in a way where it's I don't trust you, then we're going to
yes,
have friction. Absolutely. And
and
something else on that aspect as well with get out the way, I'll do it. This is a huge issue I see in expanding teams, because if you're the leader of that team, if you're doing it the whole time, you become a bottleneck. I'll tell you
yeah,
where else this is a massive issue in the entrepreneurial world, because entrepreneurs believe they've got that secret sauce, and they don't believe anybody can do it as well as you do, as well as they do. And I heard a beautiful retake of that in a book about scaling business. I forget who wrote it now, but the author said that 80% right is worth the investment of somebody else doing it. So if I do something 100% perfectly, and then I can outsource it to somebody who does it 80%, that's worth it. Okay, that's worth it. They do it 80%, and it's like, okay, but it's not me. Maybe I can tweak them to get them up to a good level. But if they do that, that's the peace of mind. That's the balance that I get, because the return is I've got somebody else's time working on that, just not my time now, which I thought was great.
that's right. Being an entrepreneur, you've got to be able to do pretty much everything in your business, because it's you, it's your reputation out there. But you've got to get to a point where you realise someone else can do this as well as me, or even better than me.
Yeah,
Finding that person is another one, hiring and making sure that they're the right fit, or however that works for you. But then, like you said, get someone who can do the bulk of it, the 70%, the 80%, and then fine tune the rest of it.
absolutely.
Be supportive, don't micromanage, be supportive of them until they're up to speed, and then you move on to the next one. So, yeah, entrepreneur, who would want to do that?
Absolutely. Fantastic. The other one was there was another beautiful takeaway from the coaching aspect, which was a real, when you see, our business is all about reframing how people think about certain things. Well, that's one of the elements anyway, getting them to think about these things in a positive way rather than a negative way, and what have you. And one of the most beautiful things I can observe is when people have a breakthrough that lifts a weight off their shoulders. It's like
Aha moment.
it's an aha moment, an aha moment, but it's the relief that comes with that aha moment. Sometimes people are sitting there and you see the pupils dilating, or the nostrils flare, or a reaction like at a wince or something like that. It's like, that's that last little piece. But what is so beautiful is when you get an understanding of some of the driving factors that people are battling with here, and some of the driving factors and some of the symptoms, and then you can reframe certain thought processes that remove limiting beliefs. And the most beautiful aspect is when you see that weight come off someone's shoulders. It's just like, my goodness. And that happened this week, my man. And it was so beautiful to see. It was a client of mine who has been doing some coaching, and she's going to do a lot more coaching now moving forward. But she had this breakthrough, which I think a lot of people who are getting into coaching battle with massively. And there was a reframe that I used, because I thought I knew that she was battling with it. And then I asked some further questions that clarified. It's like, okay, I know exactly how to frame this up in a way that's going to take that weight off her shoulders. Because you see people carrying, so much desire to do the right thing, but then having internal conflicts. And here was the internal conflict. She was doing coaching, but she was coaching people who were experts in their area, and she didn't have the expertise in that area. And her whole belief was that she had to be an expert in their world before she could coach them. And the realization is, listen, let me tell you this right now. A coach is somebody who asks world-class questions and holds you to account. Is it a good idea to know a little bit about the industry? Sure, absolutely. But the greatest coaches do not know as much about the contextual experiences of the coachee, or the contextual knowledge that the coachee has, and they're able to unlock those issues. Because as a world-class coach, you understand that discovery is way more powerful than disclosure. And by that, I mean allowing the coachee to discover the solution much more powerful than you disclosing the solution. Because if you disclose the solution, it's going to be filtered through other people's perceptions. But allowing the coachee to discover the best way forward. And I actually had the argument that if you are an expert in their area, so if I'm coaching my coachee, if I'm an expert in that area, I think I know what the answer is. And I might try and disclose it to them. But if I'm really coaching at a high level, then I want to ask questions that allows to guide that person's thought process so they start unlocking all of these particular areas. And cuz it was so beautiful to see, my man. It was somebody you could see just wanted to add so much to her team or what have you, that she had people in different areas of expertise. And having a conversational knowledge about what the coachee does is important. But having the context, detailed information, and be an expert in what they do is not that important. It's not the biggest skill set that a coach has. And being able to frame that up in a way that just absolutely made that breakthrough for her was beautiful to see. It really, really, really was. Even came back in the feedback. It's like, and it's fascinating, it's fascinating when you can take that weight off someone's shoulders, what they're capable of doing afterwards. Because so often it's the bullshit stories we're telling ourselves that hold ourselves back. It's like, how can I go and coach someone if I'm not an expert in what they do? If you start to realize, firstly, you don't need to be an expert. Now, if you're a mentor, if I was defining the term mentor as somebody who's been down the road you're currently on, that might be slightly different. But if you're a coach, you have to be able to ask world-class questions and hold people to account. You are dealing with the expert. And that's really what a coach is doing, is allowing the expert to uncover the potential solution moving forward. And I know that the brilliant, and she's reached out after the training as well, which was great. And the results she's going to get now from this new empowered frame of mind is just absolutely mind-blowing. But it's crazy how one small thing, one small shift like that can just unlock someone. It's the same as seeing the value you bring to the table, and what's common knowledge to you could be a revelation to somebody else. When people have that breakthrough, they just become unstoppable, which was absolutely beautiful. Yeah.
You see it all the time in the coaching world with coaches, sporting world. You see it all the time. You get that. I would have issues trying to coach someone who's a doctor of chemistry around the problems they're facing in combining something or other, but I'd have no problems in coaching them on how to get through other parts, like run along parallel.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Not get tied up in the nuances and the little bits, the top 1% bits that they're into. But in terms of the overall big picture, absolutely, it'd be it's actually quite helpful, I think, to have people who think outside the box a lot of the time and not get caught up in it, which is what sporting clubs do a lot. They'll get cross-code experts in their own field, but not necessarily experts in this area. Get them to come in, have a look, see what maybe skills they're lacking or where they think they can pick up or what they're missing from a completely different point of view. I think you get that. I know you get it quite a bit when they're running tenders. You get guys to run alongside a tender, for example, and see what other value or benefits that can stay out of the tendering process. Run beside it and see what other bits of value you can pull along and get for the client as well. So, being outside, it'd be good to be an expert, but then you become more of a mentor. But conversational knowledge would be good, but not necessarily need to be an expert. No. So that's
importantly, my coaches that I'm training, I want them to be able to ask world-class questions.
Yeah.
And when I mean a world-class question, it's how do you ask a question that gives pause for consideration? So how do I ask a question that stops somebody dead in their tracks to get them to reflect? And that's where we put so much focus on developing that skill set of using things like pre-frame, your inclinations, the pauses, even the type of terminology, whether it's positively loaded or negatively loaded, building that rapport first, so there's a degree of credibility, and really focus on these areas. But when you can give people, you're in rapport with somebody, and you can ask them that question, just unlocks that mind, is just phenomenal. You look at people like Mel Robbins being able to do that. Tony Robbins does it very well, and they're not related as well, to the best of my knowledge.
I guess so. The thing that I've noticed about coaching, I've watched you do it, and I've listened to good coaching, and it actually, as you get asked those questions, you yourself run through a scenario in your head of what you're doing, similar to what we were talking about earlier on, about how not being able to be in the actual, like when you're dealing with someone's problems that they're having, and you get the highlights, so to speak. If you stop and ask them a good question, like why did I ask you this, or what would you do better here? That person can actually sit inside that situation in their head and go back through it and go, that's what it is. So it's the whole leading them back down that path or through that path to discovery.
Absolutely.
In their own mind, walking it through and getting them to discover where to go, what to do,
Absolutely.
why, how, that kind of it really puts them into context more.
Absolutely. And you know what? I know we talked about this with regards to coaching, but those abilities to ask world-class questions, they are even so powerful in the world of sales or influence and persuasion as well. Because without sounding overly corny, the questions are the answer without sounding overly corny. It's like if you're negotiating or influencing and persuading somebody who's got a very strongly held belief over a certain thing that is going to cause conflict, you can't run at it with statements. You have to bring it down to base using questions. You have to start weakening that using questions, and otherwise you're just running at a strongly held belief, and you're going to go head to head with someone, and that's not elegant communication. That's my way or the highway. But use of things like those pre-frames and all of that good stuff. But that was a beautiful thing to see, my man. Just to see she'd been battling. I think she'd been battling with it for a while, and it was just, it's like an internal conflict that often we have. And I see it with salespeople as well, thinking, I need to be an expert. I can't sell with confidence until I have expertise in it. And it holds people back, until you reframe it and you get them to see that value that they bring. And then effectively, they become very aligned with what they're saying and absolutely unstoppable. And it's beautiful to witness. It really is.
That's right. And I think a good thing to remember is that you're not, a lot of the time, if you're a coach or you're, even when you're selling, you're not dealing with a problem, you're dealing with the person. And that person has that problem, and it might be basic stuff that they're not getting asked, or that it may not be the actual problem they're dealing with. It may be something that they haven't seen. Simple stuff. So just look at it that way. Look at the person.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Gee, sounds like you had a big week, Paulie. You got one?
Yeah, it was a big week, my man. It was a big week, but there was one very deep lesson I took. Again, the crazy thing is, cuz it turns out that we learn the same lessons through life, just through different mediums, different contexts. There's some basic rules of life, and one of the ones that I took from this week as well is never judge a book by its cover. Okay?
Really, this sounds good.
Because there was a young lady I was doing some work with, and she was absolutely brilliant. She was very, very elegant with her communication, very on point. Very professional, very down the line. Okay, I thought anyway. And then we were doing some presenting, and one of the other attendees did she was talking about, she did a little presentation on one of her interests and what she enjoys doing, sports she enjoys doing, and we're doing it virtually. And she goes, I enjoy paddleboarding. what do the rest of you enjoy as far as your holiday? Because I'll get them to ask questions to increase engagement and what have you. And this young lady types into the chat box. She goes, UFC. I see this come up. It's like UFC, and of course the presenter goes, "What's UFC?" So then this other lady, she types and she goes, "MMA." So now you've got you don't just have Ultimate Fighting Championships. You've got mixed martial arts, but he uses an acronym, so you're dealing with somebody who does this all the time. Are we just
a proper sports fan? Yes,
the acronym.
Yeah,
and I was in hysterics. So, folks, just for any of you who are not across MMA or UFC, it is it's hand-to-hand combat. So it's mixed martial arts, and it's two combatants getting in, stripped down to their swimming costumes, and they go for it. And this lady who was very eloquent and straight down the line turned out to be an absolute rabid UFC fan. So we found some communications and common ground on that, which was fascinating.
Well, there's an opposite version going around. Used to play rugby. Case Muse? Was it Case Muse?
Case Muse, yes.
Tell them about Case Muse one. Case Muse was a front rower for the All Blacks. Monster of a man. Yeah. And what were his interests, Paulie?
His interests, I saw his CV. So he was a brutal rugby player, but his interests included pig hunting and the arts. So he'd go pig hunting in the morning, go catch some pigs, and then he'd come back and go and observe beautiful paintings in the gallery. Diversity of interests, I suppose, man. Who's somebody to pass judgment? Not me.
Not me. No, yin and yang. That's the way. Keep
absolutely
good stuff.
Absolutely.
Very good. Very good. Hopefully that's open the eyes and open the doors for a few people this week. Anything else you need to touch on, Paulie? We got a lunch and learn coming up.
We got a lunch and learn coming up on the 19th, so this will hopefully be up. That's 2 weeks from today, I think.
Yep.
And it's going to be, what I'm going to share is I'm going to share some of the aspects that we've utilized over the last 18 months, supercharged this to be able to create significantly more productive sales teams. It's going to be stuff that is brand new. It's a reframe, and it's stuff that's not out in the market at the moment. But the results we're getting are absolutely game-changing.
Yeah.
So if you're in sales or you know somebody who's in sales, particularly sales leaders, you're going to want to check this out because it's going to be very powerful. So, yeah.
Excellent. So that'll be up on the socials as well.
Yeah.
We'll keep listening. Keep listening. Paulie, you got a big week coming up this week?
I do. I've got a few things to focus on, and then I've got a communications course towards the end of the week, which would be awesome. It's 24 people in the class, so it's going to be a big one. But that's what we're built for. That's what we love to do. People come with open minds, and try to give them the world class outcomes that they desire and deserve.
Excellent stuff. Well, I hope everyone likes the new layout, the new approach of the podcast. We've got another few ideas coming up. We've got guests coming up as well. Stay tuned, and we will be sending more learnings your way next week. Paul, thank you very much for your time today.
Appreciate it, cuz. Right back at you, my man. Great to be back doing this, yeah?
It is good fun. It's good to be back. I've missed it. All right, everyone. Take care. Have a good week.
Cheers, mate. Bye-bye.
Bye.